We are back, and we are joined once again by friend of the show, Aaron Kleinman, Director of Research at the States Project. Aaron, thanks so much for coming and zooming on over to join us here on the Majority Report. For those in the podcast audience, Aaron is decked out in a costume. You want to explain that to folks?
Oh, my son's favorite movie is Cars, so I decided to come as Lightning McQueen. And really, I just want to thank all my sponsors, Rusty's, Colgate-Palmolive, Good Guys at Nabisco, and of course, Winston Cigarettes. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Wow. So you're really committed to the bit here. I haven't seen Cars, as I am a 30-year-old childless cat lady, but with minus the cat's bark. But is your son the other car?
He actually, our family went as characters inspired by his tastes. And so he's Paw Patrol, but he wanted Dad to be Lightning.
Okay, all right.
Well, so sort of like a broader universe coming together.
Yeah. Hey, it's a fun holiday for a 5-year-old. We just want to have a good time here. But
agreed.
Let me tell you about this election. It's tighter than turn 3 at Darlington. All right.
Okay. But it's not though, Aaron. This is where I'm getting annoyed and like I'm waiting for and I don't know. I can't predict the future, right? And I don't want to jinx anything. But at the risk of boring the entire audience with my theories about polling methodology in this cycle, right? Gallup this morning had Democratic leaning and Democratic voter enthusiasm at its highest since Obama 2008. Women are leading men in early voting in swing states by 10 points. Harris and Walz both have higher favorability than both Trump and J.D. Vance. But I keep hearing from the media that this is the closest race in the history of the country. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, all right. So I will say 2 of those 3 things are important. Early voting, folks, I know it's very tempting to look at early voting numbers. If we went off early voting, Clinton was going to win Florida in 2016 and North Carolina, and we would call election night by 8 p.m. All right. In early voting, we know what the numerator is. We don't know what the denominator is. I really just, you could also just, slice open a goat and read the entrails. That doesn't do about as much good as early voting. But I think your other 2 points are very well taken. And that, historically, favorability and GDP performance correlates pretty strongly with how the ticket does. And if you look at that right now, it would point to Harris winning about 52% of the 2-party vote. So that would be a good showing. And so, but at the same time, I think that, one thing that may have crept in a little bit 2016, 2020 was a bit of complacency. And so, polls are a tool. They're not oracles. They're not foolproof, but they're a tool. And we have one tool showing us that this thing's really close. We got to treat it like it's really close. We got to run through. We got to keep revving up through that checkered flag there, folks. I don't care if you're in the red. You only got one more lap. Don't worry about the pit. Just
step on it.
Speed on through. That's right. You had time for a pit stop back in September.
Okay, so Nate Silver, I'm just moving past it. Nate Silver's starting to endorse this theory that some of these pollsters are hurting, meaning they're basically taking into account the other pollsters and their results and making it so there's very little variance right now. They're all saying pretty much the same thing with the exception of some of the pollsters we know are still doing actual polling like Gallup, Ipsos, New York Times, Siena, etc. I mean, I guess from somebody that covers these elections like this, what do you make of the fact that there's so little variance? And is like now Nate Silver is CYAing, right? Like, because he previously had been dismissive of this kind of thing. But I do think it'll be interesting to see if there's a reckoning coming in this regard.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think pollsters are sitting there thinking, oh, God, we have a race that's 5 points. We got to make it 1. I think there are methodological decisions being made, things like anchoring polls based on either 2020 vote recall or maybe even party ID that really are kind of leading to uniformity there. And if, hey, if they're all right, then people are going to defend it. If there's a miss, then it's going to be something that people revisit. But like I said, the polls are the polls. They're a tool. And if you base everything off that tool, things are really, really close. But you know what? Like, again, as we've seen, the past 2 presidential elections, it came down to a football stadium full of people, or maybe even a NASCAR super raceway full of people across 3 different states. There's certainly reason to believe that could happen again. But if you want to get even smaller, you want to talk about state legislatures, for example.
I would love to. This is why we have the
that comes down to
yes.
That comes down to a demolition derby full of voters, in a single district. That's hands on a hot car,
which is fewer than the other race he was talking about.
I've lost. I follow real sports, so I really don't know what's going on here. I follow sports where people are using their bodies physically.
You lose 15 pounds of water weight in a single NASCAR race. Let me tell you.
I do that in a sauna. You can do that in a sauna. I don't call me going to my gym's steam room a frickin' sport, but we don't need to get into that right now, Aaron. This is not what we're here for. We're here to finish the race for our democracy.
That's right.
Okay, so states. Right. What do we got to watch out for on the state level here?
All right, so you got, let's start home Pocono, Pennsylvania, the Tricky Triangle, and you have a state house there that has 102 Democrats, 101 Republicans. So close as it can be. There are going to be a few key races there where in order for Democrats to preserve their majority, they have to defend seats in some pretty conservative areas. You're going to need to see some incumbents running pretty well ahead of Trump in areas outside Pittsburgh, areas around Johnstown, areas in northeast Pennsylvania, but you still have a few flippable seats in the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia suburbs. And so kind of as you see that realignment in the state play out, you can see that at the state legislative level. And then similarly in Pennsylvania, a tie in the state Senate is within reach this cycle. You have half the Senate up every 2 years. So, ideally you could flip to a majority in 2026. So there are key seats around Erie and the Pittsburgh suburbs that we would have to flip there as well. But again, Pennsylvania is, maybe the closest state legislature in the country. And so, it's coming down to the wire, but we have some strong incumbents there. And I think one thing that we have really seen in Pennsylvania that being able to get good stories in local press is just so important for these local candidates. A good press strategy, and similarly building up kind of media that can report on things at the state level, that can report on what lawmakers are doing, is just really critical to success in that state. So we're hoping to see that borne out in Pennsylvania because we put a lot of work into that.
You mentioned Pennsylvania. I'll just interject here because they obviously 2022 they rode this negative partisanship about these extreme Republicans to success. Josh Shapiro got elected. Are you seeing a bit of that broader dynamic in the states that were most targeted by Trump's false claims of election fraud? Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia. These are states I'm watching out for in terms of maybe Democrats, if they do overperform, there can be a conversation about how election denialism has really hurt Republicans in states where the state Republican legislatures were targeted by Trump supporters because they thought that they were in on the fraudulent activity.
And actually, I think Arizona is a good example of that because Arizona, they have the highest proportion of their Republican caucus as election deniers. And again, that's another state where you have a 1-seat majority for Republicans in both chambers. So if you can flip 2 seats, and again, you could flip, there is, a suburban seat around Tucson where, each district there elects 1 senator and 2 House members. The incumbent senator is a QAnon believer, Republican, and the 2, Republican incumbents for that House seat aren't that far behind. And this is an area, again, Tucson suburbs, area that's well-educated type area that's trending left. And so if you look at, I would keep an eye on Legislative District 17 around Tucson to see if they end up paying the price. Because I think people have thought about this similarly in the Phoenix area, districts 2 and 4. which are kind of North Phoenix, again, like more suburban parts of that city where, people voted for John McCain for decades, and they're like, wait a minute, these people this is what I bargained for. Oh, and by the way, they're promoting a lot of comments and stuff. Like in Arizona, for example, water is a really big deal. You need water to live. Arizona doesn't really have a lot of it, and the right wingers in Arizona love giving it to the government of Saudi Arabia for some reason. So I'm not kidding. You can look that up. So so that's another state where, again, I think this kind of election denial kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of kind of right-wing policies that really just don't work for people, even if they are kind of temperamentally conservative. Hopefully they're kind of waking up to the fact that even if you do feel that way, just the right-wing party in the country really doesn't serve you very well.
And in Arizona too, there's abortion on the ballot, which is another part of this election that I think is getting a little lost in translation. Nevada, Arizona, the two big swing states where abortion will be on the ballot. But even in a state like Florida, where I saw Walz and Hillary are down there or going there either today or this week. Yeah. I'm shocked by that. One, they're probably like, where can we stick Hillary that she does the least damage? I wish they considered that with Bill Clinton's comments about Israel-Palestine yesterday. But I mean, we can talk about that separately. But like do they really think that because of abortion that there's a chance that Senate race is in play in Florida, or are we just like kidding ourselves if we're talking about that?
Yeah, I don't know about Florida. And part of it too is, that cuts both ways, where if that the right to choose is protected in your state, suddenly there may be less, motivation for people who are pro-choice but agree with Republicans on other things to vote for Democrats for office. So, it's hard to say which way it'll cut. But, certainly, candidates supporting the right to choose is pretty critical. And, you have that too in like, Michigan, for example, where we helped flip the state legislature in 2022, and we've been able to pass a whole bunch of laws really protecting the right to choose there. And, we're trying, again, that's another state where you have a 1-seat margin in both chambers, and the Senate isn't up this cycle. So the Senate's protected, but the Michigan State House, everyone's up. And again, it's going to be really close. Trying to make gains in the Detroit suburbs, trying to not lose as much ground, maybe some more blue collar areas, similar kind of stories the rest of the country. And so again, that's another like really critical state where hopefully the fact that they have really seen Democrats step up there and protect the right to choose, hopefully that can really buoy candidates there.
You mentioned some of the working class support and or maybe some of the concerns in there in Michigan. That there was some polling done that Harris had lost some working class support, union support in Pennsylvania. There was some counter kind of analysis to that to say, okay, well, it's less of that the case in the other two Rust Belt swing states, Michigan and Wisconsin, because the union membership and also working class there are less white than in Pennsylvania. I guess if you could expand on that thought, what are you seeing on that front? And I have concerns about the Democrats bleeding that support and just continuously racking up college-educated, high-propensity voters for the future of the coalition. But that's a broad question. Just curious about.
Yeah, well, I mean. Wisconsin, unfortunately, thanks to Scott Walker, has one of the lowest union populations of any Midwestern state. I think actually, if you look at swing states, Wisconsin may have fewer union households per capita than Nevada, which is not typical. Nevada, obviously, we know that the culinary is really big there, but that's kind of just, it shows kind of how a decade under right-wing rule really has decimated things that really help the working class stand up for itself. But in Wisconsin, they have fair maps for the first time in more than a decade. So we might be able, they have another state senate where only half of it is up every 2 years. But, the state assembly, it's feasible to flip it in one cycle. And state Senate maybe setting up for 2026. So maybe if it's possible, if people keep working in Wisconsin, you might be able to repeal right to work. And actually, again, because we have seen that, being a member of the union does correlate more with, supporting, policies that really help the working class. So Wisconsin's another kind of key state where we're looking to try to improve state policy by improving the state legislature.
And I guess we could turn to the South here, right? I mean, North Carolina, big election there, obviously, with Stein versus Robinson. What are you seeing on the North Carolina front? It's less optimistic for Harris than I would have thought. But there's also, I think, real fears from the Republicans that Stein's going to win very handily. And along with that means potential flips for the state government where the Republicans have a supermajority in North Carolina.
Right. I mean, we're trying, so right now it would be a huge shock if Stein lost. So what that means, though, is that the right has really poured all its resources into maintaining their legislative supermajority and just trying to undermine him as much as possible with that. And so, but again, we're doing our best to try to make sure that they don't get that supermajority. It's coming down to, there are a bunch of suburban districts in, like in the Raleigh and the Charlotte areas that, are really critical to that. But also there are some like rural Eastern Carolina areas that, are still pretty marginal. And again, hopefully kind of that message about really standing up for working folks really helps out there. But yeah, in terms of, the top of the ticket, that, I think when you look at maps coming in on election night, it's not so much which counties are going blue and red, but it's cutting into it's the margins in the big blue and red counties. So it's like, can you run up those big margins in Mecklenburg County, home to Charlotte, and also a number of those important state legislative races. And in Wake County, same story. But also, can you kind of lower the right-wing margins in the big exurban counties, like Union County outside Charlotte or Johnston County outside of Raleigh? And, because as, younger families kind of move further out from city cores, they're not thinking about, I go over the county line. I'm going over this county line because I want to live in a red county or a blue county. No, they're just going to the cheapest place closest to work. And so you're seeing right-wing margins in those kind of going down a little bit. And also in Cabarrus County, too, is actually one of the biggest ones near the home to Dale, by the way, where, that is probably going purple more than any other exurban county. And it also has, they were able to gerrymander the state house, but there is still a winnable state house seat there. That'll be really critical. So, it's not so much which counties are going blue and red in North Carolina, but look at the margins relative to 2020 to see how it's going that night. And also on election night, North Carolina, they've had some changes in state law that may muck things up a little bit, but it should be pretty quick to report. And so North Carolina, I remember in 2022 seeing that we won a rural house seat there. I'm like, it's not going to be a blowout. North Carolina was what told that to, showed that to me. So on election night, look at North Carolina, keep an eye on that, see what's going on there. And of course, make sure that we're breaking the supermajority there, because it's great to have Josh Stein as governor, but if his vetoes can get overridden, there's only so much he can do.
So what are those bellwethers in North Carolina to watch out for? Can you say it again? I'm actually writing this down.
So again, it's not necessarily like, like the bellwether in the state was New Hanover County. Biden carried it, but he still lost the state because Trump was able to run up big margins in exurban counties like Johnston and Cabarrus and Union and Gaston. And Biden wasn't able to get big enough margins out of like Wake and Mecklenburg. And so it's not so much is this blue, is this red, but is it blue enough? Is it red enough on election night? And that'll be a big thing in North Carolina to look out for.
What are the other kind of battleground, or maybe not battleground state, but races throughout the country where people should be watching out for on the House level? What does this indicate about the rest of the electorate, maybe, but also what are the most important key flips that we should be looking out for on Tuesday night?
Yeah, so in terms of state legislatures outside, like I think I went over all the main like kind of majority make or break ones, but Nevada, another swing state where it's going to take a while for us to know because of how that's just how Nevada votes, and it allows people to it's good for voter participation. You just got to wait a little bit. You got to be patient, but you do have a right-wing governor there who endorsed Trump, but you also have a chance at winning a supermajority in the state legislature. So it's kind of like a reverse North Carolina where they can pass, he vetoed a law protecting contraception. You can pass a law protecting contraception in Nevada if you win legislative supermajorities there. So keep an eye out for that. Also, if you look at a state like Kansas, for example, you have a Democratic governor, but you also have a right-wing supermajority. So breaking that supermajority is crucial. And, Minnesota, Tim Walz' home state, we're hoping to maintain that state house majority that kind of has catapulted him into the Veep stakes, so to speak. And then similarly in New Hampshire, people don't really think of it as a swing state as much anymore because Harris has tended to have pretty solid leads in polling there for most of the cycle. But we have a chance of breaking right-wing majorities in the Senate, flipping the House, and maybe even winning the governorship, so you could turn what is now barely a right-wing trifecta into a potential Democratic trifecta. So New Hampshire will also be one of those first states to report, so you can take a look there to see how things are going.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're not as focused on these big blue states like New York State, but I am curious, really lastly here, Aaron, if you're hearing things about voter enthusiasm in the state. We've been concerned about the right-wing shift in the state for quite a while, and I think that is why you can account for Harris's basically tie in polling on the popular vote. Like there's this pipe dream Trump supporters have that he's going to win the popular vote or whatever. I don't think that's necessary. That could it's within the realm. It's in the realm of possibility. Yeah. For the first time with him, really. But that's in large part due to the fact that like these populous states like Florida, but also California and New York, like they may not be able to drive. Both candidates may not be able to drive up the numbers in those states that don't really matter to the Electoral College, but do matter down ballot. What's your sense of that theory?
I'm certainly, and I mean, I would say, particularly the macro level, it's not just that it could be contributing the New York's kind of rightward shift, because there is one happening. I think in New York, I think there has been, especially kind of the Adams mayoralty has not been a great advertisement for Democrats writ large. Mm-hmm. And so I think that really impacts. And similarly, I think that there has been a localized shift. And you saw this in 2022 when districts that straddled the New York and Philadelphia media markets, like the Philadelphia media marketplace was like fine. And then the half of the district in the New York media market zoomed to the right. And so, there may be something going on with that. But I think it also contributes to a lot of the discourse around this, because you have a lot of people, in the media on Wall Street who think Trump has this thing in the bag. Well, those people live in New York, and they probably know a lot of people who are flipping from supporting Democrats to supporting Trump, because that's kind of the milieu that they're in. It's almost like a reverse of 2016 when like people like me, I was like, oh my God, all these people I knew that voted for Romney are now going to vote for Clinton. Well, yeah, it's because they're people I knew from the University of Virginia.
Right.
That's not indicative of the electorate as a whole. And, it's a lesson that I learned the hard way. And so I don't want to discount anything. I think that I agree with you, Emma, that certain, kind of not the horse race polling, but the peripheral polling in terms of, favorability, right, and the fundamentals around kind of, special elections, Washington top 2 primary, things that normally predict vote share are more bullish for Democrats than polling would have you believe. But, it could be that part of this narrative around, the inevitability of Trump comes from that. But we have 5 days to figure that out.
We do. 5 long days. Aaron Kleinman, You can check out the States
Yes.
Project. What are you guys
Well,
working on? How can people support?
So, all right. So, folks, this is literally the last day that we're running GiveSmart. So, like after tonight, we're shutting it off because we just can't guarantee you that your money will get there in time if you donate too late. So please, statesproject.org. Donate to GiveSmart. Those are the 8 state legislative candidates across the country who could use your donation the most right now. If you want to make a donation before the election, do it there. Do it today, please. I'm not going to text you, but we use Oath as our donation platform, so it doesn't give out your phone number and your email to everyone, so you won't get annoying texts. I get them too. I don't like them. I don't want you to get them, so that's why we use Oath. So please check it out. That is, if you're freaking out about the election, you want to do something, that is something you can do.
Amazing. All right. Well, thanks, Aaron. And we will
Thank
put a
you,
link to
Emma.
all of that in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. Have a good one.
All right. Drive off into the sunset.
Foot on the gas through that checkered flag, everyone.
Later, Aaron.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.